Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop and another blacksmith question of the day. So in this question of the day video, we're going to be answering questions on the Blacksmithing Fundamentals illustrated video. If you haven't seen that video yet and you want some more context for this blacksmith question of the day, I'll leave a link to it down in the description. I'll also put one in the cards and probably one at the end of the video. So be sure to check that video out if you want to take and see and reference what this is all about. So let's get into our first question, shall we? First question comes in from Brian Neely 2 days ago. I will read through the questions on here and make it brief, but I'll try to answer each point. It's a fairly long question or comment. Before I ask the questions, I just want to say this was a great video. So then cutting would be a form of splitting. So to answer that first and foremost, yes, cutting is a form of splitting. It's very similar. It's the same process. You're basically shearing material. Cutting, splitting, shearing, it's a fundamental process of, using a chiseled edge or a edge of something, an edge tool, to remove or separate or part a piece of material. So, yes. And swedging is a specialized form of drawing out. So swedging is different. So drawing out is to draw out while reducing the cross-section thickness. So that is a very specific fundamental, as where, stretching is, or swedging something is more like you're upsetting something. There's a lot going on in that whole thing. But yeah, it's both stretching and upsetting. It's spreading, but it's also compressing to swedge something into something. So it's an whatever they call it. It's a combination of multiple fundamental techniques, but it's not like a single fundamental technique. Let's see here. And drifting would also be a form of drawing out. Again, drifting, it's a different thing. It's not drawing out. Drawing out is reducing a cross-sectional thickness of a bar while lengthening it. And what about stamping, such as you would do to add a touch mark or using a chisel or punch to add lines and dots to a piece? I may be missing a technique or two, and there could be arguments made that bending and twisting are actually variations of the same thing, which they're not. Bending is what it is. You're bending a piece or you're straightening a piece. A twisting is you are twisting piece in a helical fashion. So it is of its own technique there. Let's see here. This was a really great instructional video showing the 7 traditional blacksmith processes, and the key ring is a tremendous piece for teaching. I am actually surprised that I have never seen another video that showed just what this one does. So cool. Glad you liked it there, Brian Neely. So I hope I answered that a little bit. So with fundamental techniques, it's very important. I want to go ahead and just, hone in on this if I can. With fundamental techniques, there are the 7 foundational techniques that I illustrated in the video, and then there is combinations of those techniques that create other techniques. So it's not the only techniques you'll ever use, but it is the founding principle of everything that you're doing. So, if you're drawing something out, you're lengthening something, and it is known in technical jargon or nomenclature that you are reducing. Therefore, it's not infinite. You're not just creating more material. You are reducing the cross section to take and pull out the material. Same way with upsetting. Again, you could say like riveting. Right? Riveting is just upsetting, right? But the whole process of riveting requires you to punch or drill a hole. Those are 2 separate techniques. They serve the same purpose. You either have to punch, drill a hole, you have to make a rivet, so you have to upset a rivet head, right? And then, or swedge one, and then you put it through and you're backing it up, and it's holding in a swedge block, so you're swedging the heads of it, and then you're swedging the other side, which is also upsetting the piece. So it's a combination of multiple things to make one riveted joint. So with the basic and the traditional, the fundamentals, the baseline that you're working with, those are just general rules that everything comes down to. Obviously, you can do other things that serve different purposes, but those are more specialized techniques that use one or more of all of the techniques combined. In fact, I have another video, or it should be coming out fairly soon, if it doesn't predate this video. If it does, I'll put a link to it, where I do a 102, a Fundamentals Illustrated 102, but that's not actually the 7 core principle fundamentals. That's an amalgamation. It's a grouping. It's a whole bunch of different fundamentals coming together to make other things. So like slitting and drifting holes, making a riveted joint, tenons, that sort of thing. So all those have multiple other multiple of the foundational techniques in them, but a grouping of them. So I hope that makes sense. I'm probably rambling on too much, just lost a lot of people there. But there are more advanced processes, but they're not considered the fundamentals. The fundamentals are 7 basic forging principles, 7 fundamental forging principles usually, and there are the byproducts of those going forward. So, great question. Thank you for asking it. Let's move on. Next question came in from a Glenn Bryant. He said, what about spreading? So spreading, again, you're reducing the cross-sectional thickness while thinning the piece or stretching the piece out. So that's technically drawing out a material. Spreading, or it could be considered it could be labeled under fullering material. That's different. But you can be using a fuller to fuller out material where you're drawing out pieces. So again, that's kind of under that main moniker of drawing out material. You're just, instead of doing it lengthwise, you're doing it widthwise. You're still reducing the cross-sectional thickness to gain width instead of to gain length. So spreading is still under the drawing out thing. Next question came in from Frank Straught. Nice idea to put on a key ring. I think I should have included an example. He thinks that I should have included an example of a mortise and tenon joint and a cymbal joint maybe, question mark, and 2 pieces of metal riveted together also. Because if you look at fences, gates, and windows grills, there are examples of those techniques as well as the ones you mentioned. So again, back to my previous statement, exactly right, correct. There is, and those are foundational. Those are foundational in ornamental work or ornamental ironwork, and you can see it. So is scrolls, right? Scrolls are a foundational principle. Just because you know how to draw out or upset something or bend something doesn't mean you know how to scroll something to save your life. You have to take and practice each one of these different techniques, but those are not fundamentals. Those are more advanced techniques, or they take a combination of the fundamentals and apply them together. But that's a perfect illustration. A mortise and tenon joint is exactly that. You have to make a hole, which is the mortise, and then you have to make a tenon, which is you draw a piece of material down or swedge it down into a round or a square that fits through that mortise, and then it gets upset on the other side or pinned. Pinning, that's another type of traditional joinery technique that is not necessarily a fundamental forging practice. It is like an elevated course of study. So great question, Frank Straught. Thank you for asking it. Or making mentions of those comments anyhow. Yeah, thank you. All right, next question came in from Bill Wool. I believe it's Wool. Asked, where did you get the idea for the keyring type holder for all those types of materials? Question mark. Think would make a great go-to for teaching students or handy for comparing salvage steel. Great question, Bill. I do not know where that idea kind of originated. I have seen several other smiths, like across the decade or so that I've been doing this, have different example rings, and I've seen demonstrators from one or the other. So I don't know where the origination of that came from. I've seen other smiths do it when they're trying to, when they had several different little forging steps involved in a process. I can't pin it down to the change or so. When I made the concept for the key ring, it's really because eventually I want to get good. I want to undertake the process of creating elements, certain elements, things that I forge on a regular basis, and doing storyboards. Some people are familiar with storyboards. They used to be a really popular thing and a teaching aid for people where, say the steps in making a snub-in scroll. You would make one snub, you'd start the first process, then you'd move on to the second step, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th. Usually it was between 6 to 10 steps at max, right? And they would show the progression all wired to a board, and they'd call it a storyboard, and then hang it up in the shop somewhere. So this way you could teach a beginner the very fundamental steps, just the fundamental steps of creating whatever that particular piece was going to be, whether it be a ram's head, a scroll of some kind, a hook, whatever, right? So it's a really good visual aid that you can explain what you're doing. For the longest, I never had enough room in my shop to have storyboards. Now I've got tons of wall space. I could have storyboards in my shop. So eventually I want to work towards doing that. And that was just one way of doing it, is to have, a little example ring that's cheap. It's easy to make. It's really portable. I can throw a whole bunch of them on a hook and just throw which ones are relatable to the class, throw them in a bucket and take them real quick. And that seems to work out real great. So yeah, it is a very powerful teaching aid, and it's also very powerful for you as a beginner to take and keep some of these things and practice them and make example rings for yourselves. So this way, when you do have somebody who, maybe it's a friend who comes over who just got a newfound interest in blacksmithing, he comes over and says, "Hey, man, I don't know how you do that. How do you do that?" You can say, "Oh, I have an example ring right here. I can show you what that's supposed to look like." Or I can, if you had a storyboard, or a story ring maybe, where you could show them the individual processes and let somebody get the visualization as well with the audible learning. So yeah, really great question. Thanks for asking it. Sorry I don't have a great answer for it. It's just kind of a process of time. I've learned it over a long time. I've seen a bunch of smiths do it, so it's nothing really new or unique to me. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this blacksmith question of the day. If you did, that's great. Hit that like button. Let me know in the comment section down below. Drop comments or questions that you have for me down in the comment section down below, and who knows, they might be part of another blacksmith question of the day. And if I earned your subscription, I encourage you to subscribe and hit that little jingly bell and set it for all notifications to get notified every time we go live or when we have videos here. So that's it. God bless. We'll catch you on the next one.